Eviction Hardship Extension California. Okay, so you're in California and you get an eviction notice.
Yeah.
You can feel like it's game over, right? Like the walls are closing in.
Right.
But this deep dive is for you, our listener.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about eviction hardship extensions in California. And this is going to be like your shortcut to understanding what can be a pretty complex area.
Exactly.
So what we want to do today is we want to look at all this great material that you've given us. We've got excerpts from the Martinez Law Center YouTube channel, and we want to look specifically at their video on how to get a hardship extension.
Okay.
And we also have that really helpful guide, Navigating Eviction Hardship Extension and Rental Assistance in California.
Right.
As well as insights directly from martinezlawcenter.com.
Exactly.
So our mission today is to sift through all of this, pull out what really matters, and try to find those hidden gems that can make a real difference for you.
Yeah.
Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, hardship extensions? Because a lot of tenants don't even realize that these things exist. They get that notice and they think, that's it, I'm out.
Exactly.
But it can be a real lifesaver.
Yeah.
Like if you've lost your job or maybe there's some sudden medical issue or some other financial problem that's come up.
Absolutely.
This could be a way to buy yourself some really critical time.
Yeah. It can be a real game changer. It's a chance to sort of, take a breath.
Right.
Maybe look into getting some rental assistance, maybe look for a new place if you need to, or just deal with whatever's going on that led to you getting that notice in the first place.
Exactly. It's about opening up some options for yourself.
Exactly.
So today we're going to zoom in on eviction hardship extensions in California. Who qualifies? What's the process? And what other tenants' rights and resources are out there that you should know about?
Yeah.
And to help us unpack all of this, we are joined by an expert from the Martinez Law Center, a firm specializing in tenant rights in Orange County, Riverside, San Diego, and Los Angeles, California.
That's right.
And you can find out more about them at martinezlawcenter.com. And just a quick note before we jump in, this is for informational purposes only, not legal advice, and is based on the information that you've shared with us.
Correct.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. What exactly is an eviction hardship extension in California?
Okay, so basically an eviction hardship extension is like a legal thing you can do in California, and it allows tenants who are having temporary money problems to ask the court for more time before an eviction actually happens.
Okay, so it's not just like hoping your landlord is going to be nice.
Right.
This is actually something built into the law.
Yeah, it's a legal provision.
Okay.
The main point of this is to give those tenants more time. Like we said, maybe they need time to catch up on rent. Maybe they need time to apply for some assistance programs. Maybe they even need to find somewhere else to live or just get things back on track after whatever happened that caused the eviction notice.
Right.
So it's really about not getting kicked out right away and giving yourself a fighting chance to get things stable again.
Okay, so especially here in Southern California, where the housing market can be really tough.
Oh, absolutely.
This sounds like a pretty crucial protection for renters.
Yeah.
So let's talk about qualifying for one of these extensions.
Yeah.
What kind of situations would make someone eligible?
Well, there's a bunch of different financial and personal reasons that might qualify you.
Okay.
The main thing is that you've got to show that there's a clear connection between whatever this hardship is and why you can't pay rent right now.
Okay.
Like it has to be directly related.
Got it.
So for instance, if you lost your job, or maybe your hours got cut way back and that means you can't make rent, that's a big one.
Yeah, makes sense.
And it helps if you have proof like a termination letter or some pay stubs showing the change in your income, or maybe even some paperwork from when you applied for unemployment.
Right, like real documentation.
Exactly.
What about like medical emergencies?
Yeah, medical emergencies can totally qualify. Because, if you get sick or injured, you might suddenly have a ton of medical bills or you can't work.
Right.
So then things get really tight financially. So in those cases, it's good to have those medical bills, maybe a note from your doctor explaining what's going on and how it's affecting you, or even some disability paperwork if you have it.
That makes sense.
And then there are also family crises.
Okay.
Like say a close family member passes away or there's some other big family emergency that can really throw your finances off.
Yeah.
In those cases, something like a death certificate might be relevant.
Okay.
And then, of course, we're in California, so we have to think about natural disasters, too.
Right. Earthquakes and wildfires and all that.
Exactly. Things like earthquakes, fires, floods. Those can cause a lot of damage and lead to job loss or other problems that make it hard to pay rent.
Okay.
And then on top of all that, the courts also have some leeway to consider other financial hardships, like if something really unexpected happens that throws you off track.
Yeah.
This is where something called judicial discretion comes in, which basically means the judge can look at your situation and decide if it's serious enough to qualify.
Okay, so it's not enough to just go in there and say, hey, things are rough.
Right.
You need to be able to really show what's going on.
Yeah. You need to be specific about what the hardship is and have solid evidence to back it up.
Okay, so
Well,
let's say you do get that eviction notice.
all right.
Walk us through the typical eviction process here in California.
Okay.
And how does this whole hardship extension thing fit into that timeline?
So usually it starts with your landlord giving you a written notice.
Okay.
Now, if you're behind on rent, this might be a 3-day notice to pay rent or quit.
Right.
Or if it's a no-fault eviction, meaning you didn't actually do anything wrong, it could be a 30-day notice or a 60-day notice.
Okay, so different types of notices depending on the situation.
Exactly.
Now, once you get that notice, can you just ignore it?
Oh, no, no, no. It is super important to respond to that notice the right way. Because if you don't, your landlord can legally move on to the next step, which is filing a lawsuit against you.
Okay.
This is called an unlawful detainer lawsuit.
Unlawful detainer lawsuit.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is basically them taking legal action to get you out of the property.
Okay, so that sounds serious.
Yeah, it is.
So how long do you have to respond once you get hit with that lawsuit?
This is where it gets tricky. Once they officially serve you with that unlawful detainer lawsuit, you usually only have 5 days.
5 days?
Yeah, 5 calendar days to file a written response with the court.
Wow, that's not a lot of time.
No, it's not. And that's why acting fast is so important.
Okay, and then what happens after those 5 days?
So if you do manage to file a response within those 5 days, the court will usually set a date for a hearing.
Right.
And at the hearing, both you and your landlord can present your side of the story, and the judge will listen to both sides and then decide what happens next, whether you have to move out or if there's another way to resolve things.
So let's talk about that hardship extension request.
Yes.
When's the best time to try to get that extra time?
So the ideal time to ask for that hardship extension is before the court actually makes a final decision in your case.
Okay, so early in the process.
Exactly. Ideally, before they enter a judgment against you.
Got it.
And usually you do this by filing something called a motion with the court.
Okay.
And in this motion, you lay out exactly what the hardship is you're facing and why you need more time.
So you're proactively going to the court and asking for that extension.
Exactly.
Okay, and then what kind of paperwork do you need to back up your request?
So you're going to need evidence.
Right.
You can't just say, hey, I'm having a hard time. You need to prove it.
Got it.
So if it's about your job, like we talked about earlier, you'll want those termination notices, pay stubs, unemployment paperwork, anything that shows how your income's been affected.
Makes sense.
If it's a medical hardship, bring those medical bills, doctor's notes, disability documentation, whatever you have.
Right.
If there's been a family crisis, like a death in the family, having a death certificate can be important.
Okay.
It's also really good to show that you've been trying to get financial help.
Okay.
So if you've applied for rental assistance programs, or you've talked to social services, or even if you've tried to get other kinds of aid, bring copies of those applications or any communication you've had with those agencies.
So it's about showing that you're taking steps to get back on track.
Exactly.
What about your own personal financial records?
Yeah, those are important too.
Okay.
Things like recent bank statements or maybe a summary of your budget that clearly shows you're in a tough spot financially.
Okay.
And another thing that can really help is showing that you're making a good faith effort.
Okay. How do you do that?
So if you've managed to make any partial rent payments, even if you couldn't afford the full amount, bring proof of those payments. Any communication you've had with your landlord about your situation is good to show.
So keep a record of all those emails and phone calls.
Exactly.
Right.
And if you're thinking about looking for a new place that's more affordable, it's helpful to show the court that you're already actively looking
That's the way. So it's about demonstrating that you're not just sitting back and doing nothing.
Right. You're taking steps to address the problem.
Got it.
So yeah, it's really about putting together a strong case with all the right paperwork to back it up.
Okay, so let's say you've got all your documents together. You're ready to apply for this extension.
Okay.
What's the process? What are the steps?
So like we said before, timing is key.
Right.
The moment you get that eviction notice, especially if you know there's a hardship involved, you got to act fast.
Don't wait.
Don't wait.
Okay.
The first thing you usually do is file that formal motion with the court. You'll spell out exactly what the hardship is and how much extra time you think you need, And remember, the best time to do this is before the court makes any final decisions in your eviction case.
Got it.
So along with that motion, you'll need to gather all those documents we talked about, the job stuff, medical bills, financial records, all of it, and you'll submit those to the court as part of your motion.
Oh.
And just a heads up, a lot of courts have specific rules about how these documents should be formatted and filed, so make sure you know what those rules are and follow them carefully.
So dot your I's and cross your T's.
Exactly.
Okay, so you filed the motion, you've got all the documents in order.
Yes.
What's next? Do you just sit back and wait?
So usually after you file, the court will schedule a hearing.
Okay.
And at this hearing, you get to actually talk to the judge directly and explain your situation in person.
Okay.
This is your chance to really dive into the details, explain why you need more time, and present all the evidence you've gathered. It's important to be prepared to talk to the judge clearly and confidently, you know? Your landlord or their lawyer will probably be there too to give their side of the story. And then after hearing from both of you, the judge will make a decision about whether to grant or deny your request for the extension.
So fingers crossed at that point.
Yeah.
So let's say the judge does say yes and you get the extension.
Right.
How much extra time do you usually get, and what are you supposed to be doing during that time?
So how much time you get really varies.
Okay.
It depends on your specific situation, what the judge thinks is fair, and even local rules can play a role.
Got it.
It could be just a few days to finalize some rental assistance, or it could be a couple of weeks, or in some cases even longer.
Okay.
But it's really important to remember that this extension is not a permanent solution.
Right. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Exactly. It buys you some time, but you got to use that time wisely.
So what are you expected to be doing during that extension period?
There are a few key things. First, if you can at all swing it, you should keep making at least partial rent payments, you know?
Okay.
Even if you can't afford the whole amount, showing that you're at least trying can go a long way with both the court and your landlord.
Right. It shows good faith.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, what else?
Communication is key.
Okay.
Keep your landlord in the loop about what's going on. Let them know what progress you're making.
So they're not left in the dark.
Exactly.
Okay.
You're also still responsible for taking care of the property, you know, according to your lease.
Right.
And most importantly, you need to be using that extra time to actually fix the problem that led to the eviction notice in the first place.
Okay.
So that could mean applying for assistance, looking for new housing, or just working on getting your finances back in order.
Right. So it's about making real progress.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then, of course, you have to follow any specific rules or instructions the judge gave you when they granted the extension.
So it's not just a free pass.
Right. There are still expectations. So yeah, you got to use that time productively.
Okay. So beyond hardship extensions, what other resources or legal protections are out there for renters in California who are facing eviction?
So California actually has a bunch of resources and protections for tenants.
Okay.
And one of the big ones that comes up a lot is the Tenant Protection Act, also known as AB 1482.
Oh, yeah. AB 1482. We talked about that a little earlier.
Right.
So for our listeners who might not be familiar, what exactly does AB 1482 do?
So one of the main things it does is put limits on how much landlords can raise the rent each year.
Okay.
Right now, it's capped at 5% plus whatever the inflation rate is in your area.
Okay.
But there are some exceptions, like newer buildings built after 2004 might not be covered.
Okay.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all thing, but it does provide some protection against these crazy rent hikes.
Right.
Another important thing AB 1482 does is set up something called just cause eviction protection.
Okay. Just cause eviction. What's that about?
So basically, once you've lived in a place for more than a year, your landlord can't just kick you out for no reason. They need to have a valid reason, like you didn't pay rent or you violated the lease.
Got it.
They can't just decide they don't like you anymore and toss you out.
So that gives tenants some stability.
Exactly.
Okay. So what counts as a just cause for eviction?
Well, the law breaks it down into two categories: at-fault evictions and no-fault evictions.
Okay.
At-fault evictions are when you as the tenant did something wrong.
Right. Like not paying rent.
Exactly. Or breaking the lease agreement.
Okay.
No-fault evictions are when the landlord has a reason to evict you, but it's not because of anything you did.
Okay. So what would be an example of a no-fault eviction?
So maybe the landlord wants to sell the property, or maybe they want to move a family member in, or maybe they want to do major renovations, things
Right.
like that.
So it's not the tenant's fault in those situations.
Right.
Got it.
Yeah. And here's the interesting thing. In a lot of those no-fault eviction cases that are covered by AB 1482, the landlord actually has to give the tenant some money to help them move.
Oh, wow. So relocation assistance.
Yeah, relocation assistance.
That's really helpful.
Yeah, it can really soften the blow of having to move unexpectedly.
So AB 1482 has some really important protections built in for renters.
Yeah. It's a big deal for tenants.
Okay, so we've talked about AB 1482. What about financial assistance?
Yes.
Specifically for helping people pay their rent.
Right.
Are there programs out there for that?
Absolutely. California has a bunch of different rental assistance programs, run by the state, the county, and even individual cities.
Okay.
So there's the California COVID-19 Rent Relief Program and the Housing is Key initiative. Those are both statewide programs.
Okay.
And then a lot of cities and counties also have their own programs to help people who are struggling to pay rent or facing eviction.
Got it.
And then you also have nonprofit organizations that can be super helpful, like Catholic Charities or the Salvation Army. Okay.
They can sometimes provide direct financial help or connect you with other resources in your community.
So it sounds like there are definitely options out there.
Yeah, there are a lot of resources. It can just be a little overwhelming trying to figure out where to start.
Yeah, that's true. Especially when you're already stressed out about potentially losing your housing, trying to navigate all these different programs can be a real burden.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what about just talking to your landlord directly?
Yeah.
Is that ever worth trying?
Yeah, sometimes that can be a good first step.
Yeah.
Just being upfront with your landlord about what's going on can sometimes lead to a solution.
Okay.
You might be able to work out a payment plan for any back rent you owe.
Okay.
Or maybe even negotiate a temporary rent reduction.
Right.
There's no guarantee, of course, but sometimes that human connection can make a difference.
Yeah, it's worth a shot.
Exactly.
But what if you do try talking to your landlord and you just can't seem to come to an agreement?
Is there another way to try to resolve things without going through the whole court process?
So there's something called mediation that can be really helpful.
Okay, mediation.
Yeah.
What's that like?
So in mediation, you and your landlord meet with a neutral third party.
Okay.
And this person is basically there to help you guys communicate and try to work out a solution that works for both of you.
Got it.
It's usually less formal than going to court
Okay.
and a lot less adversarial.
So it's not like a battle.
Right. It's more like having a referee to help you guys talk things through.
Okay.
And a lot of times, judges actually encourage mediation as a first step before things escalate.
Got it.
But even if you do go through mediation, it's still super important to know your rights as a tenant.
Right.
And to be clear about what you're willing to negotiate and what you're not.
So it's still important to be prepared.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about hardship extensions, AB 1482, rental assistance, talking to your landlord, mediation. It seems like knowing your rights as a tenant is crucial.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where can renters in California go to find good information and get legal help if they need it?
There are tons of organizations out there that are dedicated to helping tenants through these kinds of situations.
Okay.
A good place to start is usually your city or county website.
Right.
A lot of times they'll have a whole section on housing resources, including links to legal aid services in your area.
Okay, so check your local resources.
Yeah.
What about national organizations?
There are some great national organizations too,
Okay.
like the National Housing Law Project and the National Low-Income Housing Coalition. They've got a ton of information and support available.
So it's worth doing your research and figuring out what's out there.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And of course, for our listeners in Orange County, Riverside, San Diego, and Los Angeles, California,
Yes,
MartinezLawCenter.com is a great resource for tenant rights information.
absolutely.
So we've talked a lot about documentation, especially when it comes to applying for a hardship extension.
Yeah.
But it seems like keeping good records is important no matter what stage of the eviction process you're in.
Oh yeah, documentation is super crucial.
Okay, so remind us again why documentation is so important.
It's your proof.
Right.
It's what backs up your claims, whether it's showing you're facing a hardship, proving you've paid your rent on time, documenting all your communication with your landlord, or showing you've been trying to get rental assistance.
Got it.
So this means keeping track of everything.
Okay, like what kind of things specifically?
Well, your employment records, like we talked about before,
Yeah.
medical bills, emails, text messages.
So those text messages really matter.
They can, yeah.
Okay.
Even photos of your rental unit, to show the condition it's in.
Okay.
And of course, records of all your rent payments.
Got it.
And when you're communicating with your landlord, especially about important stuff, always try to do it in writing if you can.
Okay, so emails, text messages, even letters.
Exactly.
What about certified mail?
Yeah, that's a good option too, especially if you want to be extra sure they got it.
Okay. Because it gives you a paper trail.
Got it.
And even if you do talk to your landlord on the phone, it's a good idea to follow up with an email summarizing what you talked about and any agreements you made.
So there's a written record?
Exactly.
Okay.
And be super specific in those communications too, so there's no room for misunderstandings later.
Right. Dot those I's and cross those T's.
Exactly.
So to wrap things up, what are some proactive steps renters in California can take right now to protect themselves and be prepared just in case they do face a potential eviction down the line?
Okay. So number one, know your rights.
Okay.
Learn about the laws in California, especially AB 1482, and check your local city or county ordinances too.
Right, because there might be additional protections at the local level.
Exactly.
Okay.
Number two, keep good records of everything.
Okay.
Your lease agreement, rent payments, communication with your landlord, even photos of the property.
So basically document.
Exactly.
If you think you might have trouble paying your rent, talk to your landlord right away.
Oh.
Don't wait till you're already behind.
Be proactive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And do some research on rental assistance programs and legal aid services in your area, so you know where to turn if you need help.
Got it. Yeah.
Make a budget, prioritize those rent payments.
Okay.
And if you can, try to have a backup plan just in case you do have to move suddenly.
So maybe scout out some potential places or talk to friends or family who could maybe help out.
Exactly.
Okay.
And if you do get an eviction notice and you're not sure what to do, get legal advice ASAP, either from a tenants' rights organization or a lawyer who specializes in this kind of stuff.
Okay.
And stay informed about any changes in the laws because things can change.
Right.
So yeah, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to your housing.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
So facing eviction is obviously a super stressful situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the good news is there are things you can do to protect yourself. And knowing your rights, being aware of the resources that are out there, and being proactive can really make a difference.
Absolutely.
So we hope this deep dive has given you, our listener, some valuable information and helped you feel more confident about your options if you ever find yourself in this situation.
Yes.
You're not alone in this. There are people and organizations out there who want to help.
Absolutely.
You got this. Stay informed, stay strong, and know that you have options.
And one last thing. We've talked about state level stuff, but it's really important to check out your local city and county websites too.
Okay, why is that?
Because they often have specific information about eviction hardship resources and tenant rights that are unique to your area.
Got it.
Sometimes local laws can give you even more protection than the state laws, so it's definitely worth looking into.
So do your homework, know what's available in your specific location.
Exactly.
And if you're in Orange County, Riverside, San Diego, or Los Angeles, California, remember, MartinezLawCenter.com is a great resource for tenant rights information. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.
See you then.
Call now 714-442-9741. Thank you.